Brothers and sisters, it is finally the time of the ape. With Lexi leaving the format and a new set promising delicious new brood cards, there is nobody who can stand in our way. We are going to reign supreme, and we will smash everything. It is finally our time, everybody. We have two amazing things happening right now, right this second. One, heavy hitters announced. We saw some brute cards. We saw some hybrid class cards. So we're pretty sure it's going to be brutes, guardians, and warriors at this point in time. Maybe some hidden stuff to be shown soon. And that is a delicious combo for Rhinar. Guardians, historically favored matchup for Rhinar, both Bravo and Oldhim so far. So adding another flavorful Guardian to the mix, probably a good sign for us. And Warriors, always kind of been a skill match, right? We're both mid-range decks. So this is looking like a very, very promising set for the future of Rhinar. We just got done with Bright Lights, an all-mechanologist set, another good matchup for Rhinar, right? So far, so strong on the mechanologist, although Dash IO maybe is a little bursty, but we'll see, right? Nobody's quite figured that one out yet. And we had Lexi, Living Legend. Now, in my time as a competitive Flesh and Blood player, which hasn't been that long, right? About a year. In that time, I have seen every one of those very aggressive metas, the Chain, Starvo, Prism meta, the Starvo by himself meta. Then we had the Phi meta. Then we had Lexi meta, right? For the first time in my time playing Rhinar, Lexi was the only deck that I could not figure out, right? I could beat Starvos, believe it or not. Granted, I would sacrifice every other matchup to do so. But you could at least go to a tournament and go, okay, I know these players. I know roughly how it's going to look. I'm going to tech so hard into this one direction. I'm willing to lose the other matchups. The Oldhim meta was also kind of the same. You teched for the top two decks. You did really well if you could beat Phi. Prism was always a little rough, especially after Everfest. Most of our matchups became a little worse after Everfest. But I was never entirely defeated before. But Lexi's, man, I just couldn't figure it out, right? Their deck kept evolving. It kept getting better. And every time I thought I came close to beating them, they found some new thing that just absolutely destroyed us, and it was awful. Even on their bad turns, they just gave you 4 Frostbites. It was rough, right? Rough. But she's gone. And are you seeing some of the tier lists other content creators are putting out? Some big names are putting Rhinar in the contender slot right now. And I've been saying that for a minute. As soon as Lexi was gone, as soon as she left, we are in a good place, right? Our only real bad matchup left is like Katsu, and you can tech for Katsu, right? There's cards that hurt him. There's no cards that hurt Lexi, aside from Command and Conquer, right? So let's dive into where I think the tier list is right now. And this is going to be going off of, normally I would do these based on all of the tournament results, but we know Lexi's best deck, okay? And she was so good that it's kind of ruining everything. So let's look at the tier list, and I'm going to talk to you why I think Rhinar is good right now for Worlds. And then we're going to talk about heavy hitters, baby. Let's jump into it. All right. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is a super condensed tier list, okay? Like I'm not really doing multiple tiers of depth, and I'm kind of condensing a lot of the tiers because that's not really the purpose of this video. You know what I mean? Especially because Lexi just left. We truly don't know how it's exactly going to unfold yet, but we have an idea, right? We have an idea. So we know for sure Dromai has been looking amazing, right? New cards kind of bust. She was already performing incredibly well. Then we saw what Merrick Kemp and other Dash players can do with all of this new tech cards. She got much scarier. Bravo's been hanging around for a long time trying to fight his way up through the pool of Lexis. And then we know Azalea and Icelander have game, right? Each one of these decks, in my opinion, was being kept down by Lexi. So we know for a fact that they were able to perform in that meta still. And now Lexi's gone. So I'm pretty positive she's going to be sitting up here, or they're going to be sitting up here for the next couple of events, Then down here we got our ninjas who honestly were being held down by Lexi also, but also have some of these kind of time walking heroes up here like Azalea and Icelander and Bravo, who kind of hurt their inability to defend really well. So we'll see if they're going to be able to pop back up here and feast on the Dromais, or if they're going to get kept down until Icelander and Azalea kind of have to, the Wombo combo leave, right? But I'm pretty sure they're going to do great. Dory's been looking good. One of the, maybe she might fall down because she was actually one of the only mid-range heroes who had a chance against Lexi, and it was still very difficult for them. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, you're kind of looking like a little bit more of a defensive meta. Maybe now that Lexi's gone, maybe some more fatigue is going to be coming out because Lexi just wasn't super fatigable, but you can fatigue a lot of these other aggro heroes out. So maybe she'll drop down, but she's looking promising, right? And then Levia, Lexi was just curb stomping Levia like every other aggro deck in the game. So maybe she's going to be looking good. Okay. And then down here at this level, these are heroes that I think have promise, right? I would say Kano and maybe Viserai too, but Viserai can just get straight up time walked by some of these heroes up here, right? Kano's always going to be scary. Your assassins, maybe, right? If fatigue really comes back, maybe they're going to come up, but Dromai is pretty much unfatigable from well, I say that, and then we watched an assassin fatigue a Dromai on camera recently, but on Savage Feeds. And then we got Riptide, who maybe will get his piece of equipment unbanned, and he might come back up and play a little harder, Teklovesen, I'm not so sure of. And then I saw that, the card guys put Prism up here. I don't personally know how, but, if we were to go with what they said, maybe she's better than I think she is, right? So let's keep this in our mind. This is super loose, right? No data, nothing to really go off of. Lexi's still in the meta, so we don't get to see any event so far of what it looks like without her. But this is our general consensus. You can go look at the TC, the card guys player tier list, kind of similar to this. You can look at a lot of those other content creators tier lists, very, very similar-ish to this, right? So we look at this. Dromai is keeping a lot of these slower decks down, right? Kanos, Assassins, Dromai's kind of feasting on Bravos even to some extent, but I would say Bravos once he's able to tech better with the lack of Lexi in the meta, this matchup will become a lot harder for Dromai, right? But she's like the new gatekeeper. Rhinar, amazing matchup in the Dromai, right? Amazing matchup. Granted, the aggro version of her, a little harder to deal with, but still, our deck is entirely poppers. We do a lot of damage. We intimidate. We ruin their ability to block the way they want to block. It's very important for Dromai to put her cards down in a particular order, just like Icelander. Dash, favor, maybe closer to 50-50 now, but still favored matchup historically. Bravo, I believe it's a favored matchup. A lot of the better Rhinars believe it's a favored matchup, but a lot of Bravos think it's favored. So that one's kind of an interesting split. But I haven't had issues with Bravo. So I would call this favored. Azalea being probably the one problem. However, you can tech pretty hard now into Azalea. We can bring back Oasis. We can bring back Fatigue. We can bring back that kind of stuff. And it's, this is, I would say, one of our most difficult top S tier rated matchups right this second. Same thing with Icelander, right? Bollander's been historically difficult for Rhinars to deal with. I would say it's favored for Rhinar still, but good Icelander players are going to give you a challenge. So far, in the top tier, Azalea is the one hero that I'd be like, okay, we gotta play really perfectly, we gotta play really well, we gotta tech for Azalea, right? So looking amazing. Down here in tier 2, right? Katsu, definitely a lot stronger after his new cards, right? Bonds of Ancestry, very good, very good. Fi, always kind of been a historically challenging matchup. So ninjas, a little bit of a concern. Depending on if they get the feast on the Dromais or if they get controlled out by these kind of more control-y heroes, we'll see where Rhinar really is going to look. But I can beat Vice, especially after Belittle was banned, right? It was a matchup that I was historically favored into, and then Belittle got banned, and then I was much more confident, right? Katsu, much more difficult because of the random on-hits. The attack reactions, the triggers, the loops that they can do. But you can beat them, right? Amnesia, very strong. Censor, very strong, right? You can kind of tech into Katsu. Command and Conquer, much more strong into Katsu than you'd think, right? So you can tech for the ninjas. Dory, 50-50 matchup. And then, depending on who you ask, Levia does more damage than us, but we do have very similar ceilings in the context of just Blood Rush Bellows, right? Very similar ceilings. Their turns are better on average, but we get away with blocking better, right? So I would say this matchup can go either way, right? Like if we're forced to block, we don't die. If they're forced to block, they die. And if they're forced to block with the wrong cards because we intimidated them, they lose on the spot. So brute matchups are always going to be like who drew Blood Rush better. You know, it's kind of always going to be like that, at least until we have this new hero. We're going to see what they do, you know. But I would say that because I feel comfortable running so many D-reacts and I feel comfortable blocking out on major turns, I can watch the Leviah try and kill me and then eventually run out of gas and collapse. And then because we have the multiple Intimidate, Blood Rush, Bellows turns, when they're below 20 or when they're below like 15, you might intimidate the right card and they might just explode on the spot, right? And then down here, we get into a territory that's kind of a little bit weirder. You know, we have a chance against all of these heroes down here for sure. I'd say Viserai being one of the hardest, but Viserai currently is just being time walked out of the meta because of Warmongers and these three heroes up here at the top. So it's looking really good, right? Favorable, 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 rougher matchup, favorable, favorable, and maybe 50-50 skill draw dependent, right? So this is my prediction. I unfortunately can't play in Worlds. It's really sad. Also, I'm gonna miss Pro Tour LA because of my wedding, but that's okay. So I'm gonna miss out on the two major events, but I'm in my Discord and I'm working with all of the best 8 players around the planet. We're gonna walk into this next meta strong. But let's go talk about heavy hitters. Now that we know that RHINARS positioned favorably again for the first time since last Worlds meta. So right here, we have the first ever hint of what is to come out of heavy hitters from the LSS TCG Twitter account, right? They put out this little teaser video, and it's got some cool stuff in it, right? So let's take a watch real fast. Let's see what we're working with. All right, so hitting off immediately, something that's really interesting, right, is this concept of like more token generation, right? So we saw this with Outsiders a lot, these really important tokens that kind of thematically tied that whole set together, right? And in this set has 2 of them shown so far, agility tokens and might tokens. All right, so this one says at the start of your turn, destroy this, then your next attack this turn gets go again. Might tokens say destroy this and you get +1 damage to your attack, right? So what I've been asking for Brute for a long time is some sort of ramping mechanic, okay? I've always thought that would be like the most thematic thing for this berserking, blood rushing class to have, is this like threat of instead of my cards doing on hits and disrupting your turn and disrupting your hand, that my cards, when they do damage, they give me more power, right? It's like ramping. If you take all of the damage from this card, I'm going to get a little stronger next turn. If you let this card hit all the way, something cool happens on my next turn, right? And we saw that a little bit with like Swing Big on the defensive side, like, oh, this card is overtuned, but if you block it, you get something, which I thought was really cool and an unexplored space for Brutes. You know, and right now, in my opinion, I was making a video on this and never finished it because of the work problem I've been going through, but is Brutes right now have like no kind of core thematic aside from just random discarding and dice rolling, right? There's nothing that really ties Leviah and Rhinar together aside from like Blood Rush Bellows. And the fact that, you know, I guess in the new set they gave Leviah the discard mechanic, but those cards were terrible. And they're literally like Rhinar's worst version of those cards, but with blood debt. So nobody's going to use those, to be honest, you know. It's not really like a theme in my head. So I've always thought, you know, Brutes should be ramping. We should be this berserking class that is continuing to try and get stronger and stronger through the game, whether that's through more damage with on hits, whether that's through like token generation. I always thought it was going to be like a rage token or a frenzy token or something like that. Or even like healing over time, right? If I hit you with X amount of damage, or if you leak any damage, I get like an endurance token or a regeneration or something like berserky, you know? And these tokens starting to look like what I've been asking for. So I'm hyped. But let's see the rest of this video. Oh, yes. Beautiful. Oh, so hype. Let's just take a second to look at the art here. Oh my goodness, right? Look at it. It's nuts. People are losing their minds, myself included, over this hyena here. If there's a Beastmaster in this class, oh my gosh, if there's a Beastmaster in this set, I'm gonna lose my stuff. But Henrique Lindner, oh, I know he had a heavy hand in this set. I you can see his name on some of the cards that were teased. I can't wait. The thematics and the visual feel of this set. Colosseum's one of my favorite thing. Brutes, obviously, one of my favorite thing. Oh, it's gonna be cool. The art is nuts. I'll link his art station and Twitter in the description below. He had a big hand in the set, so I'm so pumped. He does some of my favorite cards in the game, so I'm ready. But all right, let's talk about these cards right here. Okay, so we got another hybrid set of cards coming out in the set. So I think that's really important for the way limited feels, right? These hybrid cards make it more accessible to have like multiple people on trying to fight for the same cards. So it really did add an interesting dynamic to the limited experience inside of Outsiders. But let's talk about this card right here, because this is the one on the screen right here. Talk a big game that has me hype. All right. So choose a number. The next time you deal that much damage or more to an opposing hero this turn, create that many might tokens. And we know the might tokens are the +1 tokens, right? It was to tease somewhere else. All right. So what makes this so cool is Brute has always had an incredibly difficult time getting cards out of your opponent's hand, because you're sending a lot of the time a vanilla 6, a vanilla 7, a vanilla 8, and your opponent would just look at their hand and they could spend as long as they wanted, and they could go, I can do more damage than that. And then they would just eat your 7 and they'd trade back a larger number. And then or they would just look at their hand and be like, oh, okay, this turn I can't, match this value. Here's 2 cards, right? So it's just kind of like the game was constantly in your opponent's favor to make the right decision. Can they outperform our damage? No. Block. Yes. Attack, right? Now this card is Brute's first ever time saying, if my card hits you, something else will happen, right? If this card hits you, I am more powerful on my next turn. And maybe there's something in my arsenal you don't want to let have 3 might tokens or 6 might tokens. Also, that's a pretty equivocal exchange if you think about it. If I'm saying my card will do 3 damage to you and you have a 3 block in your hand, you are pretty incentivized to give me 2 cards to block the 6, because that's a lot of value I'm getting. Now I'm doing 3 damage and storing 3 damage, right? So that's a big trade, right? That's powerful. Granted, it came at the cost of a blue, so it didn't come for free. Now, what else is really interesting about this card is the ability for Brutes to bluff now. And this is like gambling. It's so thematic with Brutes, the gamble, right? I could talk a big game, throw down a 2 for 6 and say, this card's going to do 4 damage to you. Why do you think that is? Is it maybe because I have a pummel in my arsenal? Maybe. Or maybe I want you to block a lot and I don't have a pummel, right? Maybe there's going to be some more Brute attack reactions. Who knows, right? Because taking 4 to the dome, losing a card, and giving me 4 might tokens off of red pummel is going to be backbreaking to certain decks, right? That's rough. So I love this, okay? Love this card. And another interesting thing here, we see classic Rhinar number of 2 for 6, block 3. This time it's a half warrior, half brute card. But this one says, when this attacks, if it has go again, create an agility token. So we see immediately a way to intrinsically create more go again as a brute. If I have an agility token and I play runner, I'll create another agility token, which means Rhinar now maybe has a consistent way to get go again on his attacks that are not scab skins and they're not draw discard cards like Pulping and Wild Ride, right? If you have a consistent way to generate agility tokens, Rhinar is way more scary. Now, if we mix the idea of having go again consistently or semi-consistently and might tokens being generated consistently or inconsistently, right? We're talking about a much more ramping style of play where, if my cards start doing any damage to you, they start creating these tokens, I'm ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. And now you're really going to be incentivized to block Brute, which is everything I've ever been asked for. Everything I've ever asked for Rhinar was some sort of ramping mechanic, some reason for my opponents to want to block my damage. Like any reason at all. And this is sick. And I'm hype. And I also will be here at the Calling Queenstown. My flights are booked. I'll be there for the world premiere. I'll be there for the calling. I'm going to report on all of the cards that come out of that set. I'm going to let you guys know what I see. I'm so pumped. I can't wait. I hope you guys crush it at Worlds and Pro Tour. I hope you guys crush it at the Calling. I can't wait to see what our new hero does. Can't wait. See you guys there. Bye.